posted a topic of who wants to talk about psychopathy. And I had the most interesting responses back from a variety of different people to talk about psychopathy across the world. And I am fascinated by the conversations I've had. And I'm so glad that you reached out to talk about your role as a coroner in India and some of the crimes you've seen. I would love to hear about your role and describe what you do. And I know we spoke last week briefly about there doesn't seem to be a lot of forensic psychologists, and how you would like to work more with a forensic psychologist, or how that could help in these cases as far as prosecuting and working together. And so I'd love to hear from you about your job, your role, and then highlight some key cases.
Great. So, basically, I am a doctor. I am currently based in Bangalore, and I work for Ramaya Medical College. So, what I have my job and responsibility over there is like we have to work upon certain, aspects of forensic cases, etc. And specifically, what I'm dealing with currently is like me and one of my colleagues, etc. We are working out on some of the courses where we try to reach out to medical students, where we try to reach out to lawyers, and also a couple of students who belong to the medical jurisprudence and toxicology. The reason being that the lawyers, the psychologists, the autopsy experts, and the criminologists are all running in four different directions. And I believe, and I firmly believe that all of them, because they're working together one cause, they should be in an integrated manner. They should work in an integrated fashion to give a common result. But the understanding of a particular topic might be different for an autopsy expert, maybe different for somebody who belongs to a criminologist background. And so my role classically is to understand not just the autopsy part, the forensic medicine part, and explain them as a teacher and to perform, a certain autopsy, etc. But also to integrate these two subjects together and trying to, puzzle and solve the cases that are not yet in the reach of public domain, and try to understand that what is the psychological aspect. How do you just not understand the physiological autopsy part, but also understand the psychological domain of that case? And I'll tell you something. In India, it is, suppose if somebody gets stabbed, and it's just a common murder. Okay, it's just another common murder. But the manner in which a person is getting stabbed, how many times stabbing has happened? What was the pattern? Was the person stalking that another victim? Was the person known to the victim, or was just a stranger? It reflects a lot about the society, and it reflects a lot about the human psyche which is working in that particular case scenario. So yes, we are trying to work on these particular aspects. Apart from that, I also am in the editorial board and board member of one forensic journal, MedLife, and also I'm in the board member of Virtual Autopsy Global Solutions. So here, what we're trying to do is that we try to provide the virtual autopsy in many cases, wherein many times we don't even want our loved ones to cut open their bodies or undergo autopsy. In that case, this kind of things happens a lot and helps a lot. Apart from that, if I'm going too long, I'll just cut it short. There's also a rise in case of necrophilia, and by law in India, it is not punishable. If you look at the case of necrophilia, there is least conviction in that, or I can say nil conviction in that. Reason being, there are no suitable laws for necrophilia. And that cases, the kind of virtual autopsy and the handling of the dead body, it matters a lot. So there's so many things which are, which are coming together. And as a kind of, I would say, a practitioner of my field, I would like to spread this knowledge and integrate as many people into this, so that they really understand and don't develop the false, perceptions about what they hear about forensic medicine, like it's just caged in a particular box. So, yeah.
Wow, I had not ever considered necrophilia, prosecuting that. I haven't come across a case like that in my practice. So to hear you say there's not laws in place for prosecution seems shocking.
It is. It is. Because and the more worse things are that, and I'll say a very general thing, male handlers. I'm not suspecting a particular, this thing. It's the only point is that the handling of a dead body is not in a very, very wiseful manner, specifically children. And they are just left out in abundance, dead bodies, which will, of course, never try to, create any kind of problem for anybody. And most of the time that we observe in the mortuaries, uh, there's a case of organ trade also going on. There's a case of dead bodies being sold across or even exported. Even, and now the body is all in your domain. Why wouldn't a person let out his own fantasies? And when they know that there is no law holding that up, it becomes rather easy for them. So, yeah.
Yeah, in the United States, obviously, most states have statutes, have laws that prohibit people from engaging in any sexual contact with a corpse, with a decedent. But I'm not surprised that in some countries that they haven't maybe caught up to the science in terms of what we know about both the paraphilias, which include necrophilia, right? This is a sexual disorder that we recognize in the clinical literature. The DSM here in the United States, we have a section that covers this as well. And this is my assumption, but I think it's probably accurate. The prevalence of this is low, and so in other words, the base rates are very low, meaning there's just not a lot of it is reported. We don't know the extent to which people are engaging in these kinds of acts. We can get into the psychology of this as well, obviously, as another area that's, I think, important to look at. And as in looking at reviewing some of the literature, when we look at Jeffrey Dahmer, we saw a lot of this sort of necrophilic behavior occurring with the deceased bodies. That he was also engaging in cannibalism as well. So there's a sexual component to all of this.
Yeah. So as Dr. Craig was telling about, and you also discussed, about this particular aspect of necrophilia. So I'll just, we will talk about this case later also. So we had this interesting case of Nithari, case was very interesting and noted. And it was a small village of Noida in UP in India, northern part of the India. And it had happened like the man was a businessman. He was an industrialist, and he was living in a huge outspread, bungalow and all, and with his servant. The case highlighted was that this man was actually involved into necrophilic cannibalism and rape, murder, sodomy of young children. So he was a pedophile, he was necrophilic, he was cannibalism, he was practicing cannibalism, and he was also raping the young women, and it included till the age of even 20 years old women. And it said that not even the businessman, but his servant also was involved. So it was very, very, this case was extremely highlighted in media. But as I said, there is no evidence of this man, specifically the businessman, being involved into cannibalism and to necrophilia. As I already said, necrophilia is just accounted in the section 377, unnatural sexual offenses. So not even considered a separate kind of crime. So he just was let off go on that particular aspect. Maybe he was convicted for a few things like pedophilic content, not even committing a pedophilic act, only content being found on his laptop and computer. That's it. So these are some things which are which I think should be reformed, And this man, I believe this kind of people rather should be completely analyzed. And this psychological autopsy needs to be done, because letting these people off on a parole is even more dangerous for society and the people who are out there. You never know what this man has in their mind. Yeah.
Did you say that in India that so pedophilia, so defined again as generally having a sexual interest in prepubescent children, just as a general definition, is that not is that not illegal? Because in some countries, this is in some countries, consent, the age of consent can be as young as 12 years of age. Various countries have different, statutory schemes around this. But I'm curious about, India. Is there a prohibition against engaging in sexual acts with prepubescent children?
Definitely. Pedophilia is strictly dealt with in India, and that provision is strongly lying there. But like my focus, as I said earlier, and even in some cases that we see, if there has been a sexual act committed, like rape has been committed on a child who is under the age group of maybe 12, even the capital punishment is awarded in such cases. So yes, these kind of cases are dealt very strongly with. Even in I would say the rape cases, and some cases where the rarest of rarest crimes are there, like the Nirbhaya rape case. I will discuss that also with you and Dr. Dana. And it was a very, very infamous case reported in 2012. It was a gang rape of 23-year-old physiotherapist in Delhi in a moving bus. And it was very highlighted in national, international media because of the intensity of the heinous acts done in this particular case. And yes, all the individuals were awarded capital punishment except one, who was a juvenile. And post that, there were reforms being done in the juvenile law, because till that time we didn't have any kind of law which would upheld the juvenile's role being in a crime of such heinous intensity, and he being the person who had done the most, say, vicious acts during the crime. So actually, he was not the person to be let off, but since we didn't have a law existing beforehand, that person could not be, convicted. But yeah, no reforms have been done. So yeah.
Yeah, that was a horrible case where they, beat and raped her, even, pulling out her organs and using an iron bar to brutally rape her. Now, as a forensic psychologist, Dr. Craig, we evaluate someone's psychological state for sentencing. So I have done sentencing recommendations for rapists. In this case, I noticed that the juvenile, he was 17 and a half at the time. In fact, there was questions about his age. So he claimed to be not 18, and maybe that, but he served 3 years. And that's so we have 3 years, and then life. The sentences range from life in prison or capital punishment. I know one of them died in custody. He was found hanging, and that sounded like someone murdered him. So I know that with the youngest individual, he's released, and they helped him change his name and is part of his identity, or he lives elsewhere. Like, it's just so shocking to my conscience to think of this. And now I also read, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that 17-year-old met up with these men on that day. And so they apparently didn't have prior relationship with these people. Like, they were partying together, and maybe that was how they came up with the sentencing. There wasn't this malice aforethought or planning together.
Absolutely, that's right. I mean, the issue that I know was highlighted in media also, that this particular, uh, misgiving that he was a juvenile, and because of that, he would not be tried. Uh, Rather, was giving a wrong message to people out of society. Like, if you're a juvenile, you are free to commit any kind of crime and of any intensity because you won't be charged for that particular set of crime. It was the case scenario prior to this, but now we have very stringent laws, even having juveniles, you know, convicted in cases if the crimes are absolutely heinous, and yes, they are dealt very strictly with that. And yes, in this particular case, issue was multiple. It was not just the juvenile having such intent, but also the in a later interview, like there was a documentary, India's Daughter, and during that, the journalist had talked to this man who was during the trial only. He was interviewed by the lady journalist, and he was asked that, why did you commit such crime? And the problem which I found was in this interview, and his line was that I wanted to teach her a lesson for what she's doing, for roaming out that late outside. I'm going to teach her a lesson for not following the cultural ethics. And this line just, is something that should be highly noted of. This thing talks about, and that man who is saying these words has already been convicted of rape, molestation, etc. in the, past. Yet there was no psychological analysis done of this man. Had it been done, we could have known that what was his intent, what was his notion about a particular set of gender, and how he thought of reacting to a particular ethical issue in his manner. Here, he didn't even think twice because he wanted to punish that. And it was like, the blaming of the victim. So very often we see that, right? Shifting the blame towards the victim. She called for it. She was responsible for it. So that thing is actually, it gives away for an easy leverage for many people to commit the crime, since they are the moral police of the community, and they're trying to teach them a lesson for dressing in a particular manner, for being late out at night with a particular friend of particular gender. So I mean, this ideology, this thinking, which they have, is dangerous. The act is just a byproduct of that thinking.
Why don't we have forensic psychologist evaluations in India? Where are the forensic psychologists? Why are these not court ordered?
So yeah, I mean, see, the cases when they reach to an intensity wherein the evaluation is required, and the more importance is given to evidence, physical evidence. Law is based more upon the evidence which is proven in the court, and that can be submissible in the court. A forensic psychologist's verdict is taken as an expert opinion, but solely basing a case on that is kind of still not you can say evolved in the Indian system right now. We do, of course, there are many cases wherein forensic psychologists, even forensic psychiatrists are involved to a level, but solely giving a verdict on that is kind of not very I can say very, very popular in India. That one notion, and that's the problem. That's what I think is the problem. These cases are just not of rape. This is not a simple rape. No, it's not a simple murder. The ideology, the psychology which is working behind it should be uncovered, and that is the major intent. Where I think we need more work going on, should be going on, and as I mentioned earlier, geographical settings also matter a lot. The way a person thinks, maybe in an Asian context, would be absolutely maybe a bit different from a person who is in Western country, Western setting. I mean, in the sense of society and the upbringing. The people who are educated class and the people who are in the middle class and the people who are in the labor class. So since everybody has phones these days, they have access to so much data, which is unfiltered. And they incorporate the exact same thing. And they believe that. And then they have their own notions about something. And then it just makes them a crazy byproduct, like this kind of.
Yeah, and when you have, you have that ideology, right? That ideology, this objectification ideologies that women, have a certain place in society, and if they violate, these expectations of what, these sort of norms are, that, and these are patriarchically based norms, right? Like, I don't know why I can't say that very clearly, but you know what I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about the patriarchy. But when you combine that with psychopathic traits and or someone with these paraphilic interests, etc., you get a really, really, it's a recipe for a very dangerous person, right? And so, like what Dr. Anderson was talking about was, our role as forensic psychologists can not necessarily just be in that sentencing piece, which we can get involved in that as well, in terms of like making recommendations, like hey, this person is extremely dangerous, and generally we would do a risk assessment in that context to incorporate the way we think about this person psychologically, the pathology that we see, and so that's kind of how we do it here in the United States. Is we would incorporate that, conceptualize this person from all of these different perspectives, looking at it from a risk model, and so we generally would classify a risk level that we see in this person, and then judges can use that information for sentencing. But it can also be used when that person is, say, eligible for parole at some point. So if they're a sexually violent predator, and we've identified that through the conviction, at some point, in the United States, we don't put people to death generally for sex crimes. There's rare instances, but we don't have capital punishment generally for rape or for sex crimes. Generally in the United States, in the past, that has been the case, but not currently. So people oftentimes are not going to get life in prison without possibility of parole. They're going to get released, and that's where we would come in, and play a role as well, as far as maybe assessing that person to see, are they still a danger to society? Because we have, I don't know if India has this, but I'd be curious to know, but we have in some states sexually violent predator statutes, which allow the state and the prosecutor's office in the counties in which the state is, or wherever they're at, to initiate those proceedings if that person is convicted of certain serious sex crimes, and then they're eligible for parole at some point. They can be civilly committed. We can get them committed to a civil hospital involuntarily once they've served their time, if we can conclusively state that they're still a danger. I don't know if that is something that you see happening in India, but I'd be curious to know.
So yes, I mean, we don't have a special set of laws which deal with the sexual offenders in, like, per se, who are violently have proven themselves to be very violent in society and all those things. I think the law works in this manner, is just not the offense, the sexual offense, but also the acts thereafter involved. It may be murder, it may be mutilation, it may be an act to hide the evidence, and even more further than that. So in these cases, and when they're combined also more with the intent of why that particular thing happened. So, like, there was an incident of Hathras rape case, or there was also this incident in Hyderabad wherein a doctor, veterinary doctor, she was late at night. She was crossing a particular road, and there's 4 people who were drunk, and then they just molested her and then raped her and then even burnt her body. Now, this is not just raping; it's going beyond the entire dimension of just not dehumanizing somebody, but also killing them and then trying to completely remove the evidence. So it was greatly, a kind of trigger for society. And then this issue was brutally, highlighted everywhere. And those people were actually killed in an police encounter. So now I would say it is a police encounter, so we don't question that. But society sometimes is in a manner that they are welcoming these things as if the encounter was good. I think that should be, first of all, left to the law to decide, number one. Number two, that in other cases wherein law is dealing anyway with the sexual offenders, they do keep in mind that, first of all, which kind of people are they dealing with. If it's a sexual offender, then definitely there is no respite for that person. He has to undergo maybe a capital punishment, or maybe life imprisonment, or maybe a capital punishment for that. That's for sure. And as I already mentioned, in some cases in some states of India, it's mandatory that if a person is found to have even committed a rape, not even a murder, just a rape of under 12-year-old child, if it's proven guilty, that man is going to be awarded a death punishment. That's unquestionable. So
that's that's death eligible, meaning that the death penalty will be applied in a case like that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, so again, we could talk about treatment, right? Does treatment work with sexual predators? And these are people, again, who have very serious sexual psychopathology. The best evidence right now is that treatment, doesn't have the success outcomes that some might argue it does. And if that's true, right? So if we can't, kind of like psychopathy, we can't treat psychopathy generally. There's really no medically acceptable interventions that work to eliminate someone's psychopathic traits. Same with like sexual psychopathology as well. Then capital punishment is certainly an option. I think that a lot of people would agree with. Now, not everybody does, but and there are a number of countries, I think, that still have adopted capital punishment for certain sex crimes.
So I would just like to add something. Like here, if we're talking about an individual basis of a person, and if we try to reform them individually, for society being such huge, at such a huge aspect of like India, this kind of death punishment works as a social deterrence for people to even commit a crime like that. It's just one social deterrence, a pretty example that if this thing happens, then this will be the reward, or this will be the punishment for that particular act. So it's more about, changing the social engineering of that in that society. Well, yeah, I agree with you that the forensic aspect should be analyzed before awarding a punishment like that, because of course there might be some issues wherein these people could be sent into correctional facilities, or maybe analyzed in medical aspect also. Like I recently read about this thing that there's this hypothalamus limbic system in our brain, and sometimes because of a tumor or maybe because of an injury, that particular system, amygdala, limbic system, etc., then also which control the emotional intelligence of a person and sexual urge of a person. If that part is damaged, it can also lead a person to commit severe intensity of crime, and that is, it's uncontrollable. It's out of urge that he will commit. So that will fall in a medical purview or medical setting in terms of that particular case.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because again, and the same could hold true for, again, if someone has sort of organic mental illness. So for example, they have a formal thought disorder like schizophrenia, and they have a psychotic break, and in that psychotic state, they have this diminished capacity that maybe they're not necessarily aware that the conduct that they're engaging in is actually wrongful conduct because of this altered state, right? So that would be in the United States, we have what's called, in some states we have the insanity defense, right? So which somebody could assert. It's similar to what you're saying here, where somebody could, a tumor on the hypothalamus, for example, or in parts of the brain that regulate, the limbic system that regulate emotion, can cause and can lead to violent behaviors, right? That are not, they're not caused by a personality or character pathology. They're caused by a brain abnormality that this person has no control over, right? It's not their fault that they develop that. So yeah, there's definitely, and that's a good point. It's like, well, do we put that person to death because they engaged in this act? If somebody's not there to investigate that, right? A physician is not there to investigate. They're not doing an imaging. They're not imaging the brain and looking to see, is there a tumor or another abnormality or something structural? So, I mean, that's important.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up. And I did evaluate a defendant in custody recently for violent felonies, and I was there to evaluate them for competency to stand trial, in which I found that they were not. But then, as I was diagnosing this person, they casually mentioned that they were diagnosed with a tumor many years ago, but decided it was against their personal beliefs, religious beliefs, or whatever reason to get it removed or looked at, which I found quite alarming in this situation because I felt that their mental state was compromised and they needed to be medically evaluated. And I made that recommendation for the judge. And that is very important. As a psychologist, I make many referrals to neurologists or psychiatrists or for further evaluation that would be out of my scope. But it's very important for us to detect that because that's so important. And that would be horrifying if, that referral wasn't made and a person is sentenced, right? And that evaluation never happened.
In a case like that, like what you're talking about, this is where the attorney, right? So the defendant's attorney needs to get involved, right, and be the advocate there. I mean, even though maybe you evaluated this defendant and you found that he disclosed that I had this like tumor. I don't know what part of the brain was involved, but if we're talking the frontal lobes, you have the frontal lobe of the brain, or we're talking about the limbic system and those pathways, that certainly is something that to pay very close attention to, right, from that neuropsychologic standpoint. But the attorney, is the one that needs to then, that can be then advocated for, in terms of, okay, we need to get the defendant evaluated as well. And so oftentimes, like if I'm defending somebody in a criminal case, that's one thing I would be asking, I would look at medical records. I would be asking about head traumas, prior TBI or traumatic brain injuries, any history of cancer, tumors, things like that could impact, right, could cause even endocrine tumors and problems with the endocrine system, that kind of stuff. All of that needs to be looked at very carefully, because those sort of things can definitely lead to these dangerous and violent behaviors that they're not necessarily driven by the person's personality pathology. They're driven by the disease process.
Yeah, and I think sometimes attorneys, they're not. I mean, they don't have the experience to always detect these things, and a lot of times I will bring this to the attorney's attention, right? But in some other cases this year that I've encountered where the defendant and the attorney already agreed on a plea bargain or something else, and then I come along and I said, "Well, this should have been evaluated sooner, but it's a little bit late now." So in California where I live, well, and then Dr. Wetter can speak to this too, but we get a lot of referrals for competency to stand trial, and a lot of times, if the attorney is in doubt, they'll refer the defendant for evaluation for competency, and that's where it's better to err on the side of caution uh, and have them psychologically evaluated. What attorneys aren't supposed to do is just, refer for a psychological evaluation when they maybe think their defendant is competent. They might be like just wanting to find out psychological information, right? And they'll get the court. What do you call it?
Fishing expedition.
Fishing, yeah. So they'll fish a fishing expedition. I get a lot of child molester cases where they're fishing for anything that will help in mitigating factors, and then I evaluate them and say, "Well, I'll tell you there's nothing mitigating here. In fact, it's much worse. Thanks for the
It's
referral.
aggravating.
Yeah, I've done some cases where I've said, "You do not want me to produce a report on this. Just so you know, it's gonna reveal nothing mitigating." I'll tell you that. But yeah,
Well, that's a very good thing that, the pedophilia cases are actually analyzed through this particular angle, because they do require a lot of, assessment. And I don't know, I want to ask you also, and I was very curious to know about this thing, that how do you, find the particular parameters wherein you try to understand that this person might have even more dangerous fantasies and not just, being just a pedophile.
Yeah, I mean, once we rule out, again, you always want to rule out sort of any medical cause for any of these, what we're seeing in the behavior of this defendant or this person. But again, I'm assuming that, again, the psychologists in India will have access to some of the same tests that we use. But, for us, it's all about data. Like we're going to be doing if we say we're doing a risk assessment, that's a prime example of it. I'm going to do quite a bit of testing on this person. I'm going to use a structured, we call structured professional judgment tool, something that allows us to really do a deep dive in this person's, both their history. So we look at the historical factors, we look at clinical factors, we look at their amenability to treatment and to rehabilitation. That's one piece that you look at. Again, if we identify this person that actually has lots of psychopathic traits, they probably have, could be classified as psychopath. We would test for that. We would use, a tool, the PCLR, which is the tool we use for assessing psychopathy. Because, if you got a psychopath in front of you, that's a whole different conversation about risk, right? So, but I see it in a lot of instances, I don't see those thorough assessments done in a lot of different settings, and not just in the US, but globally. Like they're just not doing that. They're not doing that deeper dive. And we're not really identifying these people. We're not, even in the US, I'm going to make this statement. It's controversial, but I'm going to make it. We don't do a good job of figuring out who's actually really dangerous, believe it or not, in many jurisdictions. And what I mean by that is that we might just say, oh, we're just going to throw this person into prison, right? But we haven't really carefully evaluated, is this person really, are they really dangerous, right? Do they need to be in prison for the rest of their life? We don't do the best job about that in my estimation, from what I can see. And I've worked in, prison before setting. So I saw that, no formal assessments of anybody when they come in. We don't do any psychological testing necessarily. They have to be referred for it. And so we don't get a good picture of who's dangerous, who's really dangerous, and who is it, and we can figure that out generally, but it takes work, it takes resources, it takes time, to do a thorough assessment.
Yeah, it does come down to resources. Obviously, we are strong advocates for using our services to get psychological evaluations. And it varies across states, counties, jurisdictions with their budget. And I work in different counties and states, and some of them don't have a budget or even a forensic psychologist. I encountered a county recently who a dangerous juvenile offender had been waiting 2 years to be evaluated. 2 years. A lot happened during those 2 years. Let me tell you. Okay. From trying to kill a police officer to escaping to be and this was a young female. Had I been able to do her evaluation early on, I would have made a very specific treatment plan tailored to her. I would have been able to identify her psychopathology. She had some budding borderline traits, and now much more severe antisocial, some psychopathy, some severe manipulation. And I saw her at juvenile hall. I wrote a very thorough report with a risk assessment for her not to even leave the facility to go to court. She was in danger to be escorted to court. That was my opinion. And it just goes to show some of those agencies that are lacking funding, it's a horrifying outcome. And that particular case originated in CPS, like a child being removed from the home. Then it goes, now that child commits a crime, and then they're now in criminal court. Now they're being held in juvenile hall. They haven't even been sentenced. So there's, who's going to do the evaluation? And then you know what? They want to argue about who's going to pay for it. And that's a real problem. I will tell you, Dr. Wetter and I have gone around with certain agencies. We get appointed and then no one wants to pay for it. Like the Superior Court of California, are they going to pay for it? Is the Public Defender's Office going to pay for it? Juvenile hall, these conflict attorney, and we end up, and that's a sad situation, right? Going to, and I know for a fact that a lot of people aren't evaluated because they don't have the budget to afford our services, or even attorneys just want to cut costs and not hire a forensic psychologist. I think the good news is in California, over the last, I've only been licensed less than 3 years, but I've been doing this for 10 years. So that's my experience. But before this time in the courts, I don't think they used forensic psychologists as often as they should have. It was particularly in California, forensic psychiatrist. And now I'm finding personally that I'm used a lot more, forensic psychologists, and Dr. Wetter can speak to that. But I feel like we are making progress. I feel I am booked and my services are greatly needed. I would like to see more agencies have a budget for our services. And I would like to be contracted with state agencies. And I am horrified for the counties that aren't using forensic psychologists, or they're very remote rural counties where they can't find anyone, right? And they don't really understand what a forensic psychologist does, or they underestimate their value. And I have seen many people who they're rapists, like they get convicted as rape, but never had a psych eval. And I will locally have gone on to rape or murder, get away with it. And then you say, how did this happen? And you go back, nobody ever did a psychological evaluation. How did that ever happen? What? And then you look back and it's just horrifying.
That's my point right there. We don't figure out who's dangerous and who isn't dangerous, right? If we did a better job of doing that, actually we would make our communities much safer. And that's globally, by the way. That's not just in the United States.
Yeah, and just to add, one more thing, I think society also plays a lot more role in stressing upon the importance of a psychologist. And as well as we don't educate the society of what is the meaning of this profession, what is the importance of this profession, we are all left to the mercy of judicial systems who will never anyway do that because they're just lazy, people sitting out there. And I feel that, when I took this issue out in the law department to students of law, etc., and specifically to the generation who was learning on these concepts, and they were so interested to learn about these things because they read law as a very dry subject, rules, regulations, IPCs, CRPCs, and now BNS, BNSS. But how to actually use them when such kind of cases come? Because you've got to have a forensic evaluation done in these cases. How does it mindset develop? So the thing that I observed, first educating the masses, and that's what we're trying to do by even teaching the lowest strata to make them understand that what is the meaning of this thing. what is the sexual I mean, it's huge concept to make them understand also what's the meaning of paraphilia. Imagine, telling somebody of who doesn't even understand the medical terms, something like that, but telling them and stressing the importance of these things, making them understand the value. And in such cases, even the family members who have for example, I'll tell you, if you have heard about the Buradi case, Buradi mass suicide, it was a case wherein this family members, or what about say like a lot of adults, male, female, even children, all of them had committed a mass suicide by hanging. And it's very famous, this thing, House of Horrors. It's available on internet and all. So now, why would somebody commit a suicide on this mass scale? And this was very highlighted in media. And then people got to know about what works behind the psyche of somebody who is compelling other people and his own family members to commit a mass suicide of this huge intensity, where even children are actually, that's a homicidal killing. You can obviously say it. A child doesn't want to commit a suicide anytime. It was a homicidal manner of killing. But 11 death is a huge number, and that too in a family. And then the diaries were read, all the diaries. Then they had written that their father wanted them to commit this particular thing, and then they would come back and then would reincarnate and everything. So from that point of time, these things started to be analyzed from a psychological angle, that no, we do require this, evaluation. It's extremely important. And in another case, wherein you're talking about this Shraddha Walker's murder case. So it was about an abusive boyfriend, and the problem was that the lady who was living with the boyfriend, it's a live-in relationship, and he was an abusive boyfriend, but the lady never thought of thinking this as maybe a psychological disorder. She thought the violence, the domestic violence, the amount of physical abuse, whatever was happening, it's normal. And what happened was that her boyfriend, a live-in boyfriend, murdered her and chopped her body in pieces, and he was found in a refrigerator or something like that. So, I mean, the problem is that society has to address this issue. They have to understand that these things exist in society, and just not pass on them as, or sideline them as a simple murder. It's not about simple. No crime is simple. They have a huge story, a huge background to it. And people like you, Dr. Dana, Dr. Craig, you're absolutely 110%, should be in demand, because the reason being, these cases need a very strong psychological analysis. It's not a joke to just sideline them as normal crime. And what I see is like India is having such a huge diversity of cases, but then what do? Simple suicide, simple murder. I'm saying it's simple because there's no psychological background for this. There's no forensic psychologist sitting there to analyze them. None of it. So it's not simple. It's a huge research, which needs to be conducted on these issues, and I'm a strong advocate of that. I and my entire team and my entire colleagues, and I'm trying to kind of inculcate this entire concept through my teaching, through the online course also in my students who belong to different backgrounds. But I'm trying to really, really force them to enter into this field, enter into this domain, and take up these cases, maybe suo moto, and then work on them. It's fine. Do your own work, do your own research, and make your own, expertise into that. But I mean, not all these. Apart from these, for psychologists, they should be, brought up and more highlighted in these cases. Now, that's I think more important for us as to discuss now.
I'm wondering if so the psychologists in India who are practicing, right? Is there an advocacy group or association that they subscribe to? Like in the United States, we have the American Psychological Association. They do a lot of lobbying, right, at the legislative level. And so when you're talking about like some of these changes that need to happen, right, so that there's there's more access to like having forensic psychologists be involved in some of these assessments when you've got these cases like this, when they're involving the sexual sadism and cannibalism. That oftentimes there has to be some statutory schemes in place that provide the structure so that that psychologists can actually become involved in these, so the courts actually will then appoint the psychologist to be involved in whatever that stage of the proceedings are, because your legal system is a little different in India. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think do you have what's called a civil law jurisdiction, where, because most of the rest of the world is not a common law. So the United States is a common law. We use the common law doctrines that came from the United Kingdom, but most other countries are using civil law or some iteration of that. Is that what you have there?
Yes, certainly. So like in our cases and settings, it's mostly like there of course there's civil cases, criminal cases, etc. So these kind of cases are specifically under the the domain of criminal aspect. But as to stress on one more point, the NGOs, now how do forensic psychologists come into role and play? So of course they are appointed by the government, and they are appointed for certain cases when their expert advice and expert opinion is needed, and they are always with the government to sit and work on the cases. Apart from that, the NGOs have their strong existence in Indian society, and many NGOs are functioning in such a manner that they are pressurizing the courts to take up certain cases and use the services of forensic psychologists, because they feel that this is important. And that is what I think is absolutely revolutionary, because this is India's democracy. Your people enforce their judgments and their wishes, and their need for justice. If they demand justice is given, and it's like they are very, very strong. We have you will see that if a certain level of crime is there, they demand something, they demand the services, and that has to be provided by the government. So yeah, in this matters, I will say the use of our psychologists is wide based, but where I think the problem lies is initially in the education and training systems. So more of theoretical knowledge is given or imparted to the students rather than putting them hands on in a kind of training, or maybe giving them an internship in such areas. Now, until this, I don't have a psychologist or a psychologist who understands how to counsel a particular criminal. I cannot make that person go or work in a case which is of a huge intensity. Maybe he is not even qualified for that particular handling of the case. So I think the identification in India of this problem is important, of not only educating but giving a hands-on training. Theoretical knowledge is absolutely important, but more important is the practical application and understanding what they have learned and putting that into practice. And that only happens when they're given a chance to do that. So we are working on these three factors and parameters. That is A, imparting them good education, but giving them hands-on training. So associating them with the FSL labs, the forensic science laboratories. Then on field, they are given police teams, and they are assigned different sectors. So this particular police team, you have to assist them, you have to go with them, you have to see a particular case set, and you have to generate your own reports on that. And this examination, like the government is of course taking examination for the psychologists, and when they're selected, then they are graded as officers, and then they are officially appointed on duty to work with the police teams and then take the charge of the case. So yeah, it's an upcoming field, it's an evolving field. I won't say it's just underdone, but it's kind of delayed. I would say a delayed action towards which was required, say, about a decade ago. So yeah.
Well, I strongly agree with you about more hands-on training being available to students. And I can tell you, Dr. Wetter and we have taken on 4 practicum students that we're training in forensic psychology right now. And I just did group supervision with them on Friday, and they're planning to come do a jail tour with me and in-person interviews next month. And you know, we understand this deficit, and the school reached out to me and said these students want this training, and you know, repeatedly asked me until I kind of said, okay, this is something I have to do. We have to address this problem. Yeah, we need the training, right? We need the future forensic psychologist, and you know, it's so important.
All these things that, which have come up, like narco-analysis and different methods that are there in existence. You have mapping, you have brain mapping, testing, line detection, you have narco-analysis. Of course, tools are there, but a human-to-human counseling or human-to-human understanding of a particular human mindset can never be defeated by any scientific tool or investigation methods. I mean, that is the best, I would say, crackdown on any forensic psychologist, forensic psychological aspect of our case. So, yeah.
Well, Dr. Wetter is doing his part. He's a professor. I mean, he teaches so many different classes at different places, and he sees the incoming students, right?
Oh yeah, yes. I also teach in medical school as well. So I teach medical students, and I teach medical students how to recognize personality disorders. Right? What do these look like? How do they present in a clinical context, in a clinical setting? Like what, and focusing on the more severe types of personality pathology they might be coming across, and how that could impact their relationship with the patient, and what risks that patient might present to the general population as well, and recognizing that, because again, in medical school they at least in the US, they go through these these rotations, these sections pretty quickly. Like psychiatry, they're not spending a lot of time in that one block in medical school, right? Unless they want to become a psychiatrist, then of course then the residency program is much longer. But most physicians that are being trained in the US do not want to go into psychiatry. In fact, many of the psychiatrists in the United States are actually coming from India. A lot of them get their medical training in India, and then they come here, they get licensed, and a lot of them do go into psychiatry and neurology in the United States.
Oh, that's a very interesting thing. Really, I mean, with the nature of evolving things that we see, and the isolation people are going into with the use of excessive technology, or I would say, I wouldn't blame technology, but excessive isolation, workplace, the working environment, etc., is making people more and more vulnerable for these kind of mental stresses. And I'm sure these psychiatric wards and units will be very helpful for people. And specifically, people have a lot of taboo about, I don't know, this kind of counseling sessions. They have fears to be labeled as mentally sick or mentally disabled person. So I really I'm looking forward to a society wherein globally these kind of taboos are not no more. They're taboos. First of all, they are recognized and they're addressed properly for society out there, and to make them understand. Psychologists, psychiatrists, everybody have to work together. Yeah, so it's a great work you're doing, Dr. Craig. I mean, congratulations to you.
And I want to say thank you for talking about Nirbhaya, the fearless, the case we were talking about, the 22-year-old woman who was just, she saw a movie that night, The Life of Pi. She was out with her friend. She took what she thought to be a bus ride home, and it wasn't actually a bus. It wasn't like public transportation. She got on that bus, and what happened was so horrifying. And I look at these cases, and I hate to even say a case because these are people. Like, you read her statement from her father, like, look at her life, what she was doing, all about her, her siblings, all the family factors about who she was. So I look for, okay, what happened after that? Public outrage, which, yes, that's appropriate response. Forcing the government to change the laws or expedite this case. And then I like to see, are we going to create case law? And now, as our discussion today, like, what are we doing about this problem? This isn't an isolated event. And so it seemed like it forced some changes the way people think. They were forced to look at this and say, are you kidding? What are we doing? There was this outrage, and the system had to make some changes. And I just, as we kind of close up, what laws were put in place to address this? I know we're making some progress, but specifically in relation to uh, Nirbhaya, what was the final outcome? What laws were put in place?
So, first of all, it was noted in that particular case that, the juvenile was let off after 3 years of reforms and, this thing. In Nirbhaya case, that was the highlight, I would say, of the entire case scenario. And more for so, you could see that there was strong protest against the delay in addressing the issue. First being the medication, second transfer of the patient to Singapore unit for further, treatment. The High Court had actually pointed out this thing in their judgment that the death of the victim could have been avoided if there was an immediate action taken for, if there was immediate transfer to the good facility outside medical facility. This entire thing could have been stopped, because I will tell you what exactly happened was that during her rape, she was not only raped, but there was this, L-shaped rod, iron rod was there, which was put inside her, intestine, and then it was pulled out. The large intestine and small intestine was literally pulled out using hands. So it was all infected. The entire thing need to be replaced. And because we didn't have that particular facility in India, immediate action was needed at that time. Since there was delay of shifting the patient to the better facility, the delay, had its own expense. So that was number one, that in these kind of cases, the court has strictly given orders that any kind of victim who's found in this case has to be immediately transferred without any time delay. Second thing, that in Supreme Court, this issue was challenged of mercy and all that. Mercy pleas, like we have the system wherein you can, if the High Court is giving the death penalty to the convicts, then they can apply in the Supreme Court of India. And even more so, they can ask the president for a mercy, and they, for granting them mercy, or maybe converting the capital punishment into life imprisonment. But even that was, completely dismissed by the president, also the Supreme Court of India at that time. That completely dismissed this particular thing. So there was no mercy being granted. And last, as I would say, that in this particular case, juvenile was the main person behind the entire thing. And because he was let off, people were extremely angry. And there was a reform being done in this case, wherein the juvenile, the law had changed, when this juvenile, even if he was underage, or he was, maybe not of 18 years of age, he would be tried as an adult in case of putting this intensity, and he would not be anymore just sent to a correction facility or maybe juvenile, reform center. No, he would be tried as an adult and would be given the equal amount of punishment as an adult would be given. So this was the major reform that has proved to be an important milestone into the government, and Indian law system specifically. And with the new BNS and BNSS, because we have replaced the IPC and CRPC, we are now calling it as BNS and BNSS. The name has changed to these things. But the importance is hugely that in the cases of rape, assault, molestation, um, it's very strictly taken now, and there is no more relapse being given for the convicts specifically. The third thing which was highlighted is the police investigation. It was really appreciated because all these people were caught within 40 to 72 hours. And that was the fastest action in this case because they were apprehended in six hours because there were six convicts, right? So it was important that no second should be delayed in the catch holding of these, because they could just run away, they could just disappear in the crowd, and nobody could ever find them. So the police quick investigation in this case was absolutely appreciated, and the Delhi model was then very famous, and then it is still followed. That how was this investigation handled? How was the forensics department was handling this case very successfully? That they had taken the victim's dying statement, they had taken that, they had taken all these specimens as and when required. Because see, the issue that here what we're dealing is, victim is not in the state to even talk. She is on her deathbed currently. With these many medical issues, we cannot expect even a forensic specimen to be taken. So if you know, I'll just give a small background. After all committing entire thing, these two victims were there, the male friend and the girl. They were thrown under the bus, and then the bus driver tried to crush them under the bus by driving over them. But successfully, the lady was saved by her male friend, and they both were naked and they were just thrown under a bridge. At 11 p.m., this police patrol team was there, and then they were informed that there is this naked couple lying, and then you have to go and find them. So another thing which was highlighted was that the person, the patrol team didn't have, now this lady's intestines are out, okay. They didn't have correct instruments, correct clothing to take up that lady in a correct manner and, carry her immediately for hospital and treatment. It's a police patrol van. Do you expect it to be sterilized? No, absolutely it is not. So, I mean, the transfer had also caused pain and infection spread out in that particular, method also. So, another thing was highlighted that during the police patrolling also, they are supposed to at least have one medical unit also at night patrolling in case if any kind of these kind of cases are reported, then the police unit will immediately be in contact with the ambulance, and they would immediately come on the spot and avoid the delay which has happened in this case.
Wow, thank you for sharing all that. It's horrifying to reflect back on how inadequate the system was, and I'm glad that they've made some changes, and as we've discussed, we have a long ways to go. But we are here. We're doing our jobs, what we can do. And I really appreciate you sharing today. And I would love to connect with you again in the future and just see how we can help change the law or just educate society of these crimes that occur, and what can we do about it? What are we doing? And so it's just a sombering conversation, these horrific crimes. But I appreciate the work you do, and it's very admirable. I would love to keep following you and your journey in your career. And where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
So yeah, I'm actually on my LinkedIn. I would share. It's just my normal LinkedIn account, Paridhi. You can find me there. You can approach me there. I'm working on the website too right now because I'm coming up with so many courses. And I would actually like to thank you for this lovely session. The reason being, I had a great, learning experience from both of you, and it's a great way of interaction and sharing the knowledge that what work is going on in your field, how are you progressing, and how could we engage together and learn more so on these aspects, and stressing and highlighting the importance by your platform. In fact, your voice and your opinions would go way back in my circles here, and a lot of people here are would be very, very interested to hear what you both have mentioned, Dr. Dana and Dr. Craig. It's absolutely important that what you have mentioned, the importance of forensic psychology, and I'm sure that this particular podcast will be heard by so many of my students and so many people out there who are very interested, and they'll be interested to connect with you also, both of you, so as to learn more on it. And I'm sure it guide them, in the best possible ways. So thank you so much for bringing up this topic and inviting me and having me over here. And Dr. Craig, your insights were amazing. And Dr. Dana, you both are doing a fantastic job, analyzing the cases, which have so much of things to tell. And thank you so much for inspiring us always.
Yes, and thank you. I love hearing, these insights also from all over the globe in different countries. It's great just to see how, see how some things are similar, some things are different, and how do we sort of bridge those differences or those and bring things, so that the collaboration is improved across the globe, because, everything's connected.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It gives me hope because I read all these cases and it was sombering, but then people ask me how I do this kind of work. And this is why, right? It gives me hope to know that what we're doing is very valuable. We're making changes, and that's kind of what this platform is about, right? Educating not just students, but society in general, and improving our response to these type of crimes. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time today. Thanks for listening. For episode details and merch, check out killerpsychologistpodcast.com. And for forensic services, you can book online at psychologydr.com. That's psychologydoctor.com.